I don't see how they could possibly pick anyone else but you." That was what Natalie, my closest colleague, told me over lunch just 2 weeks before the announcement. Her words echoed in my mind like a promise I clung to, a lifeline of sanity in a workplace that was slowly turning into a silent war zone. And honestly, I believed her. I had to, because if I didn't get this promotion, if all my years of sacrifice and 60-hour weeks meant nothing, then what did that say about who I was? 6 years earlier, I had walked into Crescent and Vail's Seattle headquarters with nothing but a freshly minted MBA from Northwestern and a folder of over-prepared portfolios. The office was sleek and intimidating, glass-walled conference rooms, recycled wood desks, framed awards on every corridor. I remember thinking, this is where people make things that matter. I wasn't wrong, but I was painfully naive about what it would cost. They started me off as a marketing coordinator, entry level. The pay was modest, the expectations towering. I didn't flinch. I came in early, stayed late, volunteered for every nightmare project others passed on. My first Christmas at Crescent, while the others flew home or escaped to ski cabins, I was in the office past midnight, fixing a broken product rollout for a skincare client. That campaign? It tripled their Q1 revenue. No one saw the hours. They only saw the numbers. I thought that was enough. 2 years in, I was promoted to marketing specialist. Then came the real challenges. I was handed larger accounts, Aurora Wellness, Veta Electronics, a rebrand for a struggling home goods chain called Juniper Nest. I handled them all, quietly, meticulously. My campaigns consistently outperformed expectations. I didn't just meet benchmarks, I buried them. There were quarters where my strategies were responsible for 60% of the department's new revenue. Still, I never bragged, never played politics. I believed, foolishly, that results would always speak louder than handshakes. I wasn't entirely alone in that belief. Gloria Parks, our senior marketing director at the time, saw what I was doing. She wasn't the warmest mentor, but she was sharp, razor sharp. She once told me over bitter office coffee, "Sabrina, there are 2 kinds of talent, the kind that makes noise and the kind that builds empires in silence. You're the second kind. Don't forget it." I never did. When Gloria announced her upcoming retirement, I felt a jolt of something between excitement and dread. The position she'd built, her legacy was opening. She pulled me aside the same day, her tone unusually soft. "I've already told Gerald your name needs to be at the top of the list. You're ready." Gerald Monroe, our department head, had always been cordial but distant with me. Still, if Gloria vouched for me, I felt my chances were solid. I started preparing that night. I poured myself into the application like it was a campaign. I built a sleek portfolio showcasing my most successful projects, complete with breakdowns of strategy, execution, and ROI impact. I took a crash course in leadership management. I rewrote my 5-year plan twice. Every Tuesday night, I practiced public speaking at Toastmasters, even though I hated being on stage. I studied the senior team's decision-making style, their buzzwords, their priorities. I didn't just want to deserve this job. I wanted to be undeniable. The interview with Gerald went better than I imagined. He leafed through my portfolio, nodding slowly, asking thoughtful questions. "Very thorough," he said. "You've clearly done your homework." When I left his office, I couldn't contain the grin that split across my face. Natalie was waiting by the elevators. "So," she asked. "I think I nailed it," I whispered. For the first time in years, I allowed myself to believe I was finally going to be seen. And then there was Colin. Colin Pratt joined Crescent and Vail a year after me. He had a resume that raised eyebrows but didn't survive scrutiny. Son of a former ad exec, few measurable achievements, a tendency to deflect questions with jokes. While I was building marketing frameworks at 11 p.m., Colin was cracking beer jokes by the water cooler and bragging about his golf swing. His charm was undeniable. So was his laziness. He never finished things. He'd float half-formed ideas in meetings, then somehow end up on the email thread after I flesh them out. The worst part, he didn't even hide it. "You're so good at cleaning up my messes," he once told me, chuckling, as if it were a compliment. I told myself he wasn't competition. He didn't even know the names of half our clients, let alone understand their brand voice. When we were partnered for a regional sportswear campaign, I did 90% of the work while he coasted and then presented our joint strategy as if he'd written it in his sleep. I smiled. I let it go. I told myself, it doesn't matter who gets the applause as long as the work is solid. But I felt it, the slow creep of resentment and fear, because something had changed. Colin had started showing up early, unusual for a guy who once clocked in at 9:45 for an 8:30 shift. He joined meetings he used to skip. He asked me strange questions about my strategies. "Just trying to learn from the best," he'd say with that damn smirk. And Gerald, our stone-faced, unreadable boss, was suddenly patting him on the back after meetings. Literally. Still, I clung to my numbers, to my preparation, to Gloria's quiet nod of confidence. And yet, as the day of the announcement drew closer, that quiet knot in my stomach refused to loosen. I kept waking up at 3 a.m., sweaty, hearing Colin's laugh echo through my head like a warning bell. I didn't know it yet, but I was walking into a battle I hadn't even realized had begun. The morning of the announcement, I arrived at the office before sunrise. It was still dark outside, the city hushed beneath a blanket of fog, and I could see my own breath as I walked across the parking lot. I wore my navy blue suit, the one I saved for pitch meetings and high-stakes interviews, and had gone for a soft wave in my hair, something that said both confident and composed. I sat at my desk, eyes scanning the department's Q2 projections one last time, even though no one had asked for them. I just needed something to hold on to, something real. By 8:45 a.m., the conference room was full. Gerald stood at the front with Lillian Cross, our CEO, beside him, a surprise. Lillian rarely appeared at internal announcements. Her presence sent a ripple of speculation through the team. Maybe they were restructuring. Maybe someone from outside was joining. But deep down, I still believed the moment was mine. I sat near the front, across from Natalie, who gave me a reassuring smile. Colin arrived late, of course, wearing a new gray suit and carrying a coffee he didn't even bother to hide. He shot me a look, half amusement, half something unreadable, and took the last seat along the wall. "Good morning, everyone," Gerald began, his voice smooth, practiced. "As you know, today marks a turning point for our marketing team. After an incredible 14-year tenure, Gloria Parks has officially retired. Her contributions have shaped who we are. Her shoes are not just big, they're nearly impossible to fill." Polite applause followed. I clapped, too, forcing a smile. My heart was thudding in my chest, each beat louder than the last. Gerald continued. "We conducted an extensive review of both internal and external candidates. We looked for someone with vision, creativity, leadership, someone who embodies our culture. This was it. I straightened my posture, ready to stand when he said my name. "I'm delighted to announce," Gerald said, pausing for effect, "that our new senior marketing director will be Colin Pratt." For a second, I thought I had misheard him. The room burst into applause, but the sound was muffled like I was underwater. My field of vision narrowed until I could only see Gerald's face. His smile confirmed it. No mistake. Colin was already rising, straightening his tie like he'd practiced the move 100 times. He reached the front and shook Gerald's hand with a grip too strong, too eager. I couldn't move. My legs felt anchored to the floor. My lips curled into a smile, muscle memory taking over. But inside, something cracked. Something deep. Then Colin turned toward me. "I especially want to thank Sabrina Lee," he said into the microphone, and every pair of eyes in the room turned to me. "Your work ethic, your dedication, it's been an inspiration. I've learned so much from you." I stared at him, jaw clenched. The audacity. He had taken credit for my campaigns, my strategies, my nights and weekends and holidays, And now he stood there, thanking me, as if my efforts had merely groomed him for greatness. And no one in that room called it out. When the meeting ended, I barely heard the congratulations, the murmurs of surprise. Natalie gave me a hug and whispered, "This doesn't make sense." Dylan Shaw shook his head. "Everyone thought it was yours." I nodded, smiled, said thank you, said I was fine. I wasn't. The moment I could, I bolted for the restroom, locked myself in the last stall, and only then, only behind that cold metal door did the tears fall. Silent, hot, and unstoppable. My brain raced. Had I done something wrong? Had I misread every signal? What did Colin have that I didn't? Connections? Charisma? The right jokes? My 5-year strategic plan was praised in the interview. My campaigns had the highest ROI in the department. My client feedback was impeccable. What else could I have done? I didn't have answers. Only rage. And shame. Back at my desk, Gloria was waiting. Her expression was thunderous. "This is nonsense," she said, voice low, furious. "You should have gotten that role. Everyone knows it." I tried to smile. Apparently not everyone. "I'm speaking to Gerald," she said. "This can't stand." "Please don't," I replied quickly. "I need to understand what happened first, but thank you. It means a lot that you believe in me." After she left, I sat frozen in my chair. My screen glowed with unread emails. I couldn't process anything. The world felt surreal. I had been working for this promotion for years. I had made sacrifices, skipped vacations, canceled birthdays, lost sleep, lost balance. I gave everything to this place, and it gave the title to the man who did the least. But what I didn't know yet was that losing that title wasn't the worst part. The worst part was still coming, because Colin hadn't just taken the promotion. He was about to take everything else, too. Colin moved into his new office the very next day. Corner suite, floor-to-ceiling windows, leather chairs no one had ever touched before. I passed by the glass wall once and saw him leaning back like he was already bored with the view, feet up, laughing on the phone. His nameplate had been swapped in so fast it felt rehearsed, like they'd been waiting for this. And I was still at my same desk, open space, no privacy, next to the copy machine that whined every time someone scanned. I told myself it didn't matter, title or not. I would continue doing good work. I would prove them wrong with results. Then came the first email. "Sabrina, quick favor. Could you take a look at the campaign outline for Aurora Wellness? Want to make sure it's clean before I send it to the board." That outline was mine. I had drafted it 3 weeks ago, anticipating a new leadership vision. I'd refined it, tested the language, vetted the tone with 2 focus groups. Colin hadn't touched it once, but now, apparently it needed to look like his. I replied simply, "Sure." Then I opened a folder on my desktop and named it SUIA, just in case. Inside, I started saving everything. That day was just the beginning. Within a week, Colin had established a routine. He'd pop into my inbox mid-afternoon with messages like, "Can you polish this for the client deck? Need your magic touch on this messaging doc." Just slap together a few bullets for the board, something sharp. But polish always meant create from scratch, and few bullets was code for build me a 20-slide strategy. He stopped attending half the internal meetings and forwarded calendar invites to me instead. "Loop me in if anything urgent comes up," he'd say, as if I were his assistant. At first, I complied, not out of fear, but out of instinct. I was raised to believe that doing the work well was what mattered, that your contributions would shine through if you were diligent, humble, and smart. I didn't realize I was being erased in real time. Then came the Nutriderm campaign. It was a massive pitch, one of our highest value prospects. I'd done everything: market research, positioning, creative concepts, digital flow mapping. I even built the prototype user journey. The client was impressed with our initial proposal and scheduled a second round presentation. The night before the big day, Colin called me into his office. Just need to make sure we're aligned, he said, gesturing to the chair across from his. So we present a unified vision. I spent nearly 2 hours walking him through every slide, every data point, every rationale. At the end, he leaned back and said, "Wow, you really put in the work, Sabrina. Great job." Then, with zero irony, "But I'll take the lead tomorrow. Optics." I didn't respond. I just nodded, left his office, and sat at my desk for 20 minutes, staring into nothing. The next morning, I sat silently in the back of the conference room as Colin presented my strategy like it was born from his head. He even told a story about a fake brainstorming session we never had, describing how the concept came to him while jogging. The client laughed. Lillian nodded in approval. Gerald looked pleased. And when the Nutriderm CMO praised the competitive insight section, my section, Colin smiled and said, "I wanted to dig deeper than surface data, go beyond the obvious." I had been up until 2 a.m. for 3 nights building that section. Afterward, as the clients filed out, I stayed behind to clean up the materials. That's when I passed Gerald's office. His door was slightly ajar, and from inside I heard Colin say, "Sabrina's struggling, honestly. Her pace isn't sustainable. I've had to rework a lot of her stuff. Might be time to evaluate whether she's really the right fit going forward." I dropped the file I was holding. The pages hit the floor like thunder in my ears, but no one came out. I stood there, stunned, heart racing, and for a moment, I couldn't breathe. Not only was he stealing my work, he was building a case to have me removed. That night, I didn't go home. I stayed until the cleaning crew arrived, back at my desk, pulling up emails, saving drafts, comparing timestamps. Every file, every message, every calendar edit, I documented it all. For the first time, I stopped hoping it would get better. I realized then that this wasn't incompetence. It was a plan, and I was the target. I began to disappear in stages, not in any dramatic, cinematic way, but in slow, invisible slices. I was no longer looped into creative meetings. My name started falling off email threads I used to lead. A memo about Q3 projections went out with my data, my slides, my formatting, but with Colin's name in the header. When I asked Gerald about it, he said, "We thought it'd be more streamlined coming from leadership." More streamlined, as if my existence complicated things. Colin, meanwhile, was flourishing, or at least that's what it looked like from the outside. He walked through the office like a king on tour, shaking hands, chuckling at inside jokes with executives, making comments like, "Sabrina's the execution genius. I just add the sparkle." People laughed. I didn't, because I was the one staying late to clean up his messes. I was the one redoing strategy decks after he tossed in last-minute edits that made no sense. He even started using a phrase that made my skin crawl. "Let's put Sabrina on it." Like I was a button he could press. Like I wasn't the reason our department was still afloat. One Friday afternoon, as I packed up to leave, Colin strolled by and dropped a binder on my desk. "Need this reworked by Monday. Big meeting coming up. Board wants fresh ideas." "I have plans this weekend," I said flatly. "Cancel them," he replied, already walking away. "Clients don't wait." That night, Eli and I sat at a restaurant we hadn't visited in months. He watched me push salmon around on my plate for 10 minutes before he said it. "You're not here." "I'm tired," I muttered. "You're not just tired, Sabrina. You're gone." I didn't answer, because he was right. I hadn't really been anywhere in weeks. I hadn't heard a song without dissecting how it might work as background audio for a pitch video. I hadn't touched my sketchbook. I hadn't looked in the mirror without flinching. My world had shrunk to the width of a desk and the tone of Colin's voice. And I hated who I was becoming. 2 weeks later, the breaking point came. We were prepping a revised campaign for TerraSkin Naturals, a huge sustainability client with a notoriously picky board. I had built the entire plan: eco-conscious positioning, cross-channel rollout, influencer partnerships. Colin, of course, did nothing. The morning of the presentation, he waltzed in 15 minutes before the meeting, flipped through the deck once and said, "Looks solid. I'll take the lead." I blinked. "You haven't even read it." "I trust you," he said, adjusting his tie. "Besides, the board wants to hear from leadership." I sat there, back pressed against the chair, watching as he walked into that room and once again claimed my voice as his own. He didn't even stumble. He knew the rhythm, knew how to ride the wave of someone else's labor. The clients loved it. Gerald clapped him on the back after, and I went to the break room and stood there staring into the fridge, gripping a plastic water bottle until my knuckles turned white. That's when I heard it. Colin, laughing, his voice low but clear through the half-open door to Gerald's office. "I've had to clean up a lot of her work lately. She's burning out. Not sure she's reliable long-term." The bottle dropped from my hand and bounced off the floor, the water splashing up my sleeve. I didn't care. I was frozen. That night, I walked through my apartment like a ghost. Eli had left a note on the counter. "Out with friends. Text me if you want to talk." I didn't text. I didn't eat. I didn't cry. Instead, I opened my laptop. I found the folder. CYA, just in case. Then I opened a new document and typed 4 words at the top. Formal letter of resignation. But this wouldn't be a standard goodbye. This time, I was going to make sure every lie he told came back to bite him. And I wasn't going to whisper the truth. I was going to print it on the finest paper I could find. I spent the entire weekend crafting my resignation letter. Not just the kind you submit through HR, not the soft, diplomatic script that leaves doors open. This one had layers. The first page? Professional, polished, courteous. It thanked Crescent and Vale for the opportunity, for the growth, for the lessons. It wished them continued success. But the attachment? That was a warhead. I titled it Supplementary Documentation Regarding Resignation. Inside were neatly categorized sections. Email threads where Colin had assigned me tasks that mirrored his deliverables. Screenshots showing him asking for feedback, only to present my exact wording to clients. Timestamped project files with my name in the metadata and his name on the final slides. I included side-by-side comparisons of strategy decks, his versus mine. They were identical, minus one thing, his initials in the footer. And then, buried near the end, was the clincher, a budget discrepancy. Weeks earlier, while reviewing the Terraskin campaign numbers, I'd found something odd. A $4,500 invoice for external creative consulting, billed to a firm Colin had casually mentioned was run by a friend. The work had never materialized. The deliverable was one vague infographic I'd created myself. I'd saved that too, along with the invoice and payment record. At the very bottom of the packet, I added one final paragraph. Copies of this documentation have been securely sent to Human Resources and the Board of Directors, as per Crescent and Vale's whistleblower policy. I am prepared to discuss these concerns further, if contacted. Otherwise, this letter will serve as both a formal resignation and a closing of all active obligations. I signed it, scanned it, printed it on heavy linen paper. Tuesday morning, I dressed like armor, black blouse, tailored blazer, hair pulled back so tightly it hurt. I walked into the building at exactly 9:55 a.m. and headed straight to Gerald's office. "Make it quick," he said, barely glancing up. "I got a call with New York in 10. I placed the envelope on his desk without a word. "What's this?" he asked. "My formal resignation," I said evenly. "Effective 2 weeks from today." He blinked, finally meeting my eyes. "Is this about the promotion?" "Because if it is, Sabrina, it's about integrity," I interrupted. "I've outlined the specifics inside." He gave a tight, skeptical chuckle and opened the letter, flipping casually through the first page. Then he reached the packet. His face shifted, eyes narrowing, lips parting, flipping faster now, page after page, color draining from his cheeks. Then he stopped, the page with the invoice. He looked up. What is this supposed to mean? It means everything in that file is true and verifiable, I said calmly. You can't just send things to the board, he said, rising voice tight. There's a process. There's also a whistleblower clause, I said, meeting his gaze. And as department head, you qualify as senior management. He was silent for a long moment. Then he changed tactics, sat back down, voice smooth. Look, Sabrina, maybe we can fix this. Would you consider staying? A promotion, a pay bump, your own team? I shook my head. You don't understand. I'm not negotiating. I'm done. At least withdraw the board complaint, he pressed. Let us handle it internally. I smiled, but there was no warmth in it. They already have the file. So does HR. This isn't just my goodbye. It's my receipt. His expression soured. You realize this burns bridges, don't you? I have contacts across this industry. I'm counting on that, I replied, voice low, because now they'll know what kind of leadership Crescent and Vale rewards. I turned and walked out. My heart was pounding, my palms slick. But I didn't stop. Back at my desk, I began packing up my personal items. Natalie appeared seconds later, her eyes wide. What did you do? I shrugged, told the truth. Moments later, Colin sauntered over, his smile a little too casual. Heard a rumor. You're quitting. I am. Finally realized this wasn't your league. I met his gaze. No, Colin. I finally realized I deserved better than watching someone else take credit for my work. Then I leaned in, just enough to watch the smirk falter. And you might want to prepare for your meeting with the board this afternoon. I hear they've got questions about the Terraskin budget. He went pale, and I walked to the elevator with my box of belongings and didn't look back. By the time I reached the parking garage, my phone had already lit up with 5 messages. Natalie, Dylan, even Gloria. What happened? Did you actually leave? Gerald just stormed out of the building. The corporate grapevine had kicked in faster than I expected, but I didn't answer anyone. Not yet. I sat in my car for a moment, staring at the steering wheel and let myself exhale. I had done it. I had burned the bridge, strategically, thoroughly, and without apology. That evening, Gloria called. Sabrina, she said without greeting, you just made a lot of very powerful people very nervous. I'm not surprised. I mean that in a good way. One of the board members I used to work with called me after receiving your file. Said it was the most organized and professionally damning resignation packet he'd ever seen. I spent the weekend formatting it, I replied flatly. She laughed. Of course you did. The next morning, I woke up to an email from Lillian Cross, the CEO herself, requesting a meeting. The subject line read simply, Resignation Follow-Up Confidential Discussion. I stared at it for several seconds before opening it. They weren't done, and apparently neither was I. When I arrived at the Crescent and Vale headquarters 2 days later, everything felt different. Colder. The receptionist looked at me like I was a ghost. A security guard escorted me upstairs. Lillian was waiting in the boardroom with 2 other executives, neither Gerald nor Colin in sight. Thank you for coming, Lillian said, gesturing for me to sit. I remained standing. We've reviewed your documentation, she continued, and conducted internal interviews. What you exposed, it's not just troubling. It's systemic. Gerald has been removed as head of the department and reassigned to a compliance oversight role in Cleveland. Colin has been placed on indefinite probation pending a full ethics review. I blinked. I hadn't expected them to act that quickly, or that decisively. We want to make things right, she said. We're offering you the senior marketing director position, effective immediately, with a 35% salary increase and a permanent seat on the executive committee. I didn't respond right away. The room was silent. They waited. I let them, because something had shifted in me. A month ago, I would have said yes without hesitation. But now I had seen behind the curtain. I had felt the weight of being erased, of being sacrificed for politics, and I had clawed my way out with nothing but documentation and nerve. And in doing so, I had found something more powerful than any title: clarity. I appreciate the offer, I said finally, but I'm building something of my own now. Something where performance isn't dependent on proximity to power. I'm not coming back. Lillian's expression didn't change, but I saw the disappointment flicker in her eyes. Is there anything we could offer that might change your mind? I smiled. No, my decision isn't about compensation. It's about integrity. And you can't give me that. I have to build it myself. I walked out of the boardroom and didn't stop moving until I was back in my car, keys in the ignition, hands steady. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. For the first time in years, I felt clean. In the weeks that followed, I worked from a small co-working space off Union Street. I filed the paperwork for Sabrina Lee Collective, launched a one-page website, and took on my first client, an old contact from Nutriderm, who emailed me the day after the news broke. I always knew you were the brains behind our strategy, she wrote. When I heard you'd left, I knew exactly who I wanted to call. By month 3, I had 4 clients. By month 6, I had hired my first employee. Natalie, still a Crescent, sent me regular updates. Colin had faded into the background, barely attending meetings under constant watch. Gerald never returned to Seattle. And then one evening, just as I was locking up the office, my phone buzzed. A message from Dylan. Jessica just got promoted to VP. Your resignation started something, Sabrina. You kicked the door open for the rest of us. I stared at the message, then looked out at the city beyond the glass. The lights, the motion, the possibilities. I had burned a bridge, but on the ashes I built a new road. And this time, I made sure I was the one drawing the map. It's been a year since I handed in that resignation letter. 12 months since I walked out of Crescent and Vale with nothing but a cardboard box, a folder of evidence, and the stubborn belief that I deserved better. And now, I sit at the corner desk of my own studio office, a small sunlit space with whitewashed brick walls, a coffee machine that actually works, and a view of the harbor that never fails to calm me. On the door, printed in clean serif type, is a simple name: Sabrina Lee Collective. The word collective wasn't chosen by accident. I wanted something that didn't scream CEO or founder, something that reflected what I truly valued: collaboration, credit where it's due, shared vision. The kind of workplace I had always dreamed of but never quite found. We're a team of 6 now. Not big, not flashy, but solid. 3 full-timers, 2 part-time creatives, and an admin who used to be a client's intern and now runs circles around most agency coordinators I've ever met. We take on the projects we believe in. We say no when a client's values don't align. And we don't compete with each other. We build off one another. That alone feels revolutionary. Some days are still hard. I won't lie. There are moments where I second-guess a pitch, where I wonder if I should have taken the safety of that title when it was offered, when I remember the security of a biweekly paycheck. But then I open a proposal, see my team's names listed on the cover in equal font size, or hear a junior associate confidently present an idea I watched them nurture from scratch, and I know I made the right choice. About 4 months ago, I was invited to speak at the Pacific Northwest Brand Summit. It was surreal walking into that ballroom, not as someone's assistant, not as the woman behind the curtain, but as a keynote guest. I gave a talk called Invisible No More, Building a Career on Your Own Terms. The applause was nice, but what stayed with me were the people who lined up after. Young women in blazers too big for their frames, carrying laptops heavy with unpaid ideas. One of them asked me, "What's the most important thing to look for in a company?" I didn't even have to think. Credibility, I said. Not just theirs. Yours. A place that recognizes what you bring and doesn't make you fight to prove it every day. Afterward, someone from Crescent and Vale passed me in the hallway. I recognized him. Colin's old assistant, now a strategy lead. He stopped, shook my hand. Your resignation, it changed everything over there. People started asking questions. HR finally has teeth. And the new head of marketing? She actually listens. Just thought you should know. I smiled, nodded, and moved on. Because that version of me, the one who stayed silent, who swallowed indignity for the sake of appearances, she's gone now. Eli and I are still together. Stronger, somehow. He once told me, watching you build this, it's like watching someone return to themselves. He was right. For the first time in years, I feel like my reflection matches the woman I always hoped I could be. Every so often, I get emails from people still at Crescent. Quiet thank yous, updates on promotions, notes that say, "You leaving gave me permission to want more." I keep them in a folder titled, Proof of Impact, not for ego, for reminder, because success, real success, isn't about being handed a title in a glass room. It's about standing up, even when your voice shakes. It's about saying no to erasure. It's about leaving the place that undervalued you and building the one you always needed. If you've ever sat alone in a bathroom stall after a meeting that should have been yours, if you've ever watched your work be passed off as someone else's genius, if you've ever told yourself to stay just a little longer while your spark quietly dies, I hope you remember this. You are not crazy. You are not too emotional. You are not difficult. You are the engine. And you don't owe anyone's silence. Not anymore.